The massive Dracolisk ship appeared in Earth's orbit on a quiet Tuesday morning. Its hull gleamed like polished obsidian, reflecting sunlight as it hovered silently above the Pacific Ocean. Earth's defense systems went on high alert, but the alien vessel made no aggressive moves. Dr. Hannah Park stood in the United Nations Emergency Council chamber, her heart racing. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, she had prepared for this moment her entire career, yet nothing could truly prepare humanity for first contact. "The ship is broadcasting on multiple frequencies," announced General Kim, his voice tense. "They're requesting communication." When the transmission appeared on the main screen, many people gasped. The Dracolisks were massive reptilian beings with armored scales in shades of copper and bronze. Their eyes, 4 of them, glowed with an intense yellow light, and their mouths contained rows of teeth that could easily tear through metal. "We come to establish relations," the translator rendered their deep, rumbling speech. "We are the Dracolisk Collective." Over the next few days, a meeting location was agreed upon, a specially constructed facility in neutral territory in New Zealand. Dr. Park led the human delegation alongside diplomat June, who specialized in conflict resolution. The first face-to-face meeting was tense. The Dracolisks towered over the humans, standing nearly 3 meters tall. Their movements were precise and controlled, but Hannah noticed how they constantly assessed their surroundings, much like Earth's apex predators. "Your world interests us," said Elder Krith, the delegation leader. "We have watched your broadcasts for decades. You are younger than many species we encounter, yet you show unusual traits." The discussions proceeded cautiously. The Dracolisks revealed they came from a planet orbiting Proxima Centauri, the closest star system to Earth. They possessed technology far beyond human capabilities, including faster-than-light travel and energy manipulation. "Why contact us now?" asked June during the 3rd day of talks. "We observed before engagement," Elder Krith explained, his scaled head tilting slightly. "Your species has potential." What potential meant remained unclear, but the talks continued productively. Both species agreed to exchange scientific knowledge and establish regular communication. The Dracolisks seemed particularly interested in human social structures and child-rearing practices, which struck Hannah as odd for such a fearsome species. On the 5th day, everything changed. During a demonstration of Earth technology, a power surge caused an explosion in the facility. Ceiling supports collapsed, and chaos erupted. Hannah found herself separated from the main group, choking on dust and smoke. Through the haze, she heard a high-pitched keening, not a human sound. Following it, she discovered a young Dracolisk trapped under fallen debris. The juvenile was smaller than the adults, perhaps 2 meters long, with softer scales and wide, frightened eyes. Without thinking, Hannah began removing debris from the young alien. The rubble was heavy, and her hands soon bled from the effort, but she continued until the young Dracolisk could pull free. "Stay calm," she said softly, though unsure if the juvenile understood. "You're going to be okay." The young alien was injured, purple blood seeping from a wound on its leg. Hannah removed her jacket, fashioning a tourniquet to stop the bleeding. She worked steadily, applying her knowledge of terrestrial reptiles while adapting for alien physiology. When the emergency teams finally reached them, they found Hannah cradling the young Dracolisk's head in her lap, speaking soothingly while monitoring its breathing. What Hannah didn't know was that every moment had been observed. The Dracolisk adults had reached the scene minutes after the collapse but remained hidden, watching the humans' actions with their young. That evening, Elder Krith requested a private meeting with Hannah. "The one you helped was Merak, my offspring," the elder said. "You had no obligation to assist." "It needed help," Hannah replied simply. "I wouldn't leave any being to suffer if I could help." The Dracolisk was silent for a long moment. "In our history, we have encountered many species. Most fear us. Some worship us. Others try to destroy us. None have shown care toward our young." "That's just being human," Hannah said. "Perhaps," Krith said, "that is what makes your species unique in our experience." The next morning, the Dracolisks presented a formal alliance proposal far more extensive than the initial diplomatic overtures. They offered technology, knowledge, and protection. The reason remained unclear until months later, when they finally revealed their true interest in humanity, something far more important than technology or resources. Something that would change both species forever. Dr. Jean walked slowly through the massive garden dome on the Dracolisk homeworld. After 3 years of diplomatic relations, he was among the first humans granted permission to stay on their planet for extended research. The air here was thicker than Earth's, with a sweet scent like cinnamon and copper. Above him, twin moons hung in the purple sky, casting strange shadows through the translucent dome. His Dracolisk guide, Sora, led him toward a special area they called the nursery grounds. Jean had been asking to see Dracolisk young since his arrival 2 weeks ago. Our cubs are rarely shown to outsiders, Sora explained, her scaled armor catching the light as she moved. But the elders have made an exception for you. They entered a large clearing where about 20 young Dracolisks played. Unlike the imposing adults, the cubs had softer features and more colorful scales. They ranged from the size of a human toddler to nearly adult height. They grow quickly in the first few years, Sora said. Then development slows. Jean noticed something immediately. The cubs seemed more interested in him than in their activities. Several stopped their play to watch him. 3 of the smaller ones approached cautiously. This is unusual, Jean said. Are they always this curious about visitors? Not visitors, Sora replied. You specifically. As he continued his observations over several days, the pattern became clear. The Dracolisk young were drawn to humans in a way they weren't to other species or even their own kind. They followed Jean through the compound, mimicked his gestures, and seemed calmer in his presence. After a week of observations, Jean was summoned to meet with Elder Krith in the ancient stone chambers of the council. You've noticed our young are attracted to humans, Krith stated, not a question but a fact. Yes, Jean confirmed. I've been wondering why. The massive elder moved to a wall covered in ancient carvings. Our history tells us that Dracolisks were not always as you see us now. Our evolution took a strange path. He pointed to images showing smaller Dracolisks alongside furry creatures. We evolved as apex predators, but with a gap. A gap? Jean asked. Our species lacks certain, nurturing instincts during critical developmental periods. In ancient times, we formed bonds with another species. They helped raise our young during these periods, teaching them emotional control and social bonds. Jean studied the carvings more closely. A symbiotic relationship? Precisely. These creatures, we called them Tula, were empathic. They sensed emotions and taught our young how to understand their own feelings and those of others. Without this teaching, our young grow physically but remain underdeveloped in crucial ways. Krith led Jean deeper into the chamber, showing him more recent carvings depicting sick and dying Tula. 200 years ago, a plague swept through the Tula population. Despite our advanced medicine, we could not save them. They went extinct. Jean began to understand. And since then? Our species has been in decline. Our young develop physically but lack emotional regulation. They grow aggressive, unpredictable. Many do not survive to adulthood. Those who do often cannot function in our society. In a smaller room, Krith showed Jean a series of brain scans. These are from cubs born before the Tula extinction, he explained, pointing to complex neural pathways. And these are from recent generations. The difference was striking. The newer scans showed less development in key areas. We've tried finding substitutes, other species, technology, intensive training. Nothing works. Krith turned to Jean, his 4 eyes intense. Until we met humans. Jean remembered Dr. Park's interaction with the injured cub years ago. You think we can replace what the Tula provided? We know you can. Our cubs recognize something in humans. Something ancient memory tells them to seek out. When they interact with humans, their neural patterns begin to resemble those of our healthier ancestors. Jean sat heavily on a stone bench, absorbing this revelation. So your interest in Earth was never about technology or resources, Krith confirmed. It was about salvation. Our species faces extinction within 5 generations without intervention. Later that evening, Jean watched as a small Draculus cub approached him in the garden. It moved cautiously, head tilted in curiosity. Without thinking, Jean knelt down to be at eye level with the creature. "Hello there," he said softly. The cub chirped and moved closer, eventually sitting beside him. Jean remained still, respecting its space. After a few minutes, the cub leaned against his side, a rumbling purr emanating from its chest. From the shadows, Elder Krith watched the interaction with hope in his ancient eyes. For the first time in generations, there might be a future for his kind. But the question remained, would humans be willing to take on such a responsibility once they understood what was being asked of them? Jean looked down at the trusting cub beside him and wondered the same thing. The United Nations Security Council chamber was silent as Dr. Jean finished his presentation. The images of declining Draculisc neural patterns still displayed on the main screen, stark evidence of a species facing extinction. "Let me understand this clearly," said Secretary General Miho, breaking the silence. "The Draculiscs want us to raise their children?" "Not exactly raise them," Jean clarified. "Foster them during critical developmental periods. Their physiology and basic needs would still be managed by Draculisc specialists, but they need human interaction to develop proper emotional regulation." Admiral Lee stood up, his face stern. "This is absurd. We're talking about apex predators with the strength to tear through metal. Placing them in human homes would be an unacceptable risk." The debate raged for weeks. Scientists were fascinated by the biological implications. Military leaders worried about security. Politicians argued about diplomatic consequences. Meanwhile, the Draculisc delegation waited patiently for an answer, though Jean could see their growing anxiety. Finally, after much debate, a compromise was reached, a single, highly controlled experiment with one volunteer family and one Draculisc cub. Dr. Minji Kim stepped forward. As a developmental psychologist with 20 years of experience working with children with emotional regulation disorders, she was uniquely qualified. She lived alone in a rural property that could be modified for the experiment, and most importantly, she volunteered. "I understand the risks," she told the selection committee. "But I also understand what's at stake for their species." 2 months later, a special facility was built adjoining Minji's home. Security systems were installed, and a team of scientists established monitoring protocols. A small Draculisc ship landed in her backyard, carrying precious cargo. The cub, named Tarek, was the equivalent of a 6-year-old human child in development, though already the size of a large tiger. His scales were bright copper with gold flecks, and his movements were quick and sometimes jerky, a sign of the emotional regulation issues the Draculiscs had described. The first week was challenging. Tarek was easily startled and would hiss defensively when confused. He broke furniture accidentally with his powerful tail and struggled to understand human expressions. Minji remained patient, using techniques from her work with children. "We'll establish routines first," she explained to the observation team. Predictability helps create security. By the third week, Tarek had settled into daily rhythms. Mornings began with physical exercise in the reinforced yard, where Minji taught him games that channeled his predatory instincts constructively. Afternoons included quiet time where she read to him, teaching language and emotional concepts simultaneously. The breakthrough came during the second month. Tarek had been frustrated by a puzzle designed to test problem solving. In previous generations of Draculiscs, frustration quickly turned to destructive rage. Instead, Tarek paused, took 3 deep breaths, a technique Minji had taught him, and tried a new approach. "Did you see that?" whispered Dr. Jean to Elder Krith, who had come to observe. Self-regulation. Krith's eyes glistened with an emotion Jean couldn't identify. Something our young haven't displayed in generations. As months passed, Tarek's progress accelerated. He learned to identify and name his emotions. He developed empathy, showing concern when Minji had a cold. He even began helping with household chores, carefully carrying dishes with his clawed hands. The first major challenge came when Tarek entered adolescence earlier than expected. Minji woke one night to find him gone from his sleeping area. Following the tracker signal, she found him in the woods behind her property, stalking her neighbor who was walking his dog. Instead of panicking, Minji called out softly, "Tarek, what are you feeling right now?" The young Dracolisk froze, conflicted. "Hungry, but not for food." 4. Chase. "That's your predator instinct," she explained calmly. "It's normal for you to feel it, but we need to direct it properly." The next day, Minji designed a complex hunting simulation with robotic targets. She taught Tarek to channel his hunting drives through appropriate outlets while maintaining his emotional awareness. After 14 months, the scientific monitoring team presented their findings to the UN committee. Tarek's neural scan showed dramatic improvements, matching the historical patterns of healthy Dracolisks. More importantly, he had developed the emotional intelligence needed to function in both human and Dracolisk society. On the day Elder Krith came to evaluate Tarek's progress, Minji felt nervous. The young Dracolisk sensed her anxiety and gently placed one clawed hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry," he said in the combined human Dracolisk language they developed. "I will show him what you taught me." Watching them interact, Minji realized something important. This wasn't just about saving the Dracolisks. Something profound had happened in her own life too. Despite their differences, she had formed a bond with Tarek that transcended species. The experiment was just the beginning of something that would change both their worlds forever. 5 years after the first successful fostering experiment, the Kim family home had changed dramatically. What was once a quiet rural property now served as the main training center for the Human Dracolisk Fostering Initiative. The large barn had been converted into orientation spaces, and several smaller buildings dotted the property. Dr. Minji Kim stood before 30 nervous human families, all volunteers for the expanding program. Beside her stood Tarek, now fully grown at 3 meters tall, his copper scales gleaming in the morning light. "The most important thing to remember," Minji explained to the group, "is that despite their appearance, the cubs need the same things human children need: consistency, boundaries, and love." Her husband Day managed the technical aspects of the program. He had originally been skeptical but had grown to love Tarek like a son. Today, he was demonstrating the safety features of the modified homes. "The reinforced play areas can withstand their strength," he explained, showing diagrams. "And each home is equipped with special cooling systems for their comfort." Their biological daughter Sue, now 12 years old, had grown up alongside Tarek. Where other children might fear the Dracolisks, she moved comfortably among them. Today she was helping introduce the new foster families to the 5 cubs who had just arrived from the Dracolisk homeworld. "This is Nara," Sue said, kneeling beside a small female cub with emerald green scales. "She's shy at first, but loves water." "And this is Jian," she added, pointing to a stockier male with bronze markings. "He's very curious about everything." The program had expanded gradually. After Tarek's success, 10 more families were selected, then 50, and now over 300 worldwide. Each fostering period lasted approximately 3 Earth years, during which the cubs learned emotional regulation, social skills, and cultural understanding. Not everything had been smooth. There had been accidents: a cub accidentally breaking a foster brother's arm during play, another destroying an entire living room during a tantrum. But the program administrators had learned from each incident, improving protocols and training. The unexpected benefits were becoming clear too. Psychologists studying human children in the program noticed remarkable development. Sue and other children raised alongside Dracolisk cubs showed exceptional emotional intelligence, problem-solving skills, and empathy. They learned to read non-human cues, explained Dr. Park, who now headed the scientific research team. Their brains developed different pathways for understanding emotions across species boundaries. In schools with integrated species classrooms, bullying rates had dropped dramatically. Children who learned alongside Dracolisks became natural mediators, often stepping in to resolve conflicts before they escalated. Meanwhile, on the Dracolisk homeworld, the first human-raised generation was now reaching maturity. Tarek had returned to his people 2 years ago to serve as a cultural liaison. The difference between these young adults and previous generations was striking. Elder Krith, now very old even by Dracolisk standards, addressed the United Nations via holographic projection. For the first time in 2 centuries, our young can take their place in our society, the ancient Dracolisk said, his voice filled with emotion. They have strength without aggression, intelligence without cruelty. You have given us our future. The success had not come without opposition. On Earth, some religious groups claimed the program was unnatural. Security concerns remained, especially as the adolescent Dracolisks entered their hunting phase. And some critics argued that humans were creating a generation of Dracolisks with divided loyalties. But for most people involved, the benefits were undeniable. Interstellar trade with the Dracolisk Collective had brought new technologies and medicines to Earth. Cultural exchange flourished. And most importantly, deep bonds had formed between the species. One evening, Minji sat on her porch watching the sunset. A small Dracolisk cub named Jira played in the yard with Sue, the two of them building an elaborate sand castle together. Despite being different species from different worlds, their laughter sounded remarkably similar. Her tablet chimed with an incoming message, a video call from Tarek. His face filled the screen, familiar despite its alien features. "How are the new families adjusting?" he asked. "They're nervous but doing well," Minji replied. "How are things on your end?" "The council has approved expansion to 500 cubs next year," Tarek said. "And something else, 2 other species have approached us asking about the program." Minji raised her eyebrows. "Other species?" "Yes. Apparently, we're not the only predator species with this developmental gap. The Veridon and Nelthak both have similar issues. They want to know if humans would consider fostering their young too?" Minji finished, understanding dawning. "Exactly. It seems humans have a reputation now. They call you the nurturers." As the sun set over her training center, Minji realized that what had begun as a single experiment had grown into something that might reshape relations across the galaxy. Not through force or technology, but through something uniquely human, the ability to care for those different from themselves. Retry SF, Part 5, Galactic Recognition. Of the part in 800 words and only give me small story. It should be interesting and write it in third-person style, and it should be in simple and basic English. Use simple and basic English. And do not give headings. Edit. The Grand Hall of the newly constructed Galactic Council Embassy on Earth glittered with the light of 1,000 stars, visible through its transparent dome ceiling. Representatives from 27 spacefaring civilizations filled the room, their diverse forms creating a living tapestry of galactic life. This was the first time in the Council's 12,000-year history that they had convened on a newcomer world like Earth. In the center of the hall stood Dr. Minji Kim, now in her 70s, her hair silver but her eyes still bright with the same curiosity that had led her to accept a Dracolisk cub into her home 20 years ago. Beside her stood Tarek, his copper scales now deepened with age, wearing the formal armor of a Dracolisk High Ambassador. "Humanity's contribution cannot be measured in traditional terms," announced the Regelian counselor, their crystalline body refracting light as they spoke. "In merely 2 decades, they have reshaped interspecies relations across 3 spiral arms of our galaxy." The Galactic Fostering Academy, once just Minji's rural home, now occupied a sprawling campus outside Seoul. It hosted young from 5 predatory species, all facing similar developmental challenges to the Dracolisks. The Academy had become Earth's most important galactic export, not technology or resources, but a unique approach to nurturing. "The Nalthak species has seen a 60% reduction in territorial violence," continued the counselor. "The Veridon have established their first peaceful colonies in centuries. And the Dracolisks," they paused, gesturing to Tarek, "have become one of our most valued peacekeepers." Dr. Jean, now the Earth ambassador to the Council, smiled at the irony. Humans had entered galactic society afraid of being conquered or destroyed by more advanced civilizations. Instead, they had found their place through something so fundamental to their nature that they had almost overlooked it, their capacity to nurture and connect across boundaries. The ceremony was interrupted by a sudden blaring alarm. Holographic displays appeared throughout the hall, showing a fleet of warships entering Earth's solar system. "Vorn Empire vessels," reported a security officer. 15 warships approaching Earth orbit. "They're charging weapons." The room erupted in concerned murmurs. The Vorn were an expansionist species who had rejected council membership, preferring conquest to cooperation. Their technology far exceeded Earth's defensive capabilities. Evacuation protocols, began the Earth Security Director, but was interrupted by Tarek. "Wait," the Dracolisk said calmly, touching a communication device on his armor. Almost immediately, space around Earth rippled as 20 massive Dracolisk battleships materialized from hyperspace, positioning themselves protectively between Earth and the approaching Vorn fleet. "This is Admiral Tarek of the Dracolisk Collective," his voice boomed through the hall's communication system as he broadcast to the Vorn ships. "The homeworld of the Nurturers is under our protection. Any aggressive action will be met with immediate and decisive response." The Vorn ships hesitated, clearly surprised by the Dracolisk presence. For tense minutes, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the Vorn fleet powered down their weapons and changed course, retreating from the solar system. Later that evening, as the celebrations continued with renewed vigor, Dr. Hannah Park, the xenobiologist who had first helped a wounded Dracolisk cub 20 years earlier, stood with Minji at the observation deck. "Did you ever imagine it would lead to this?" Hannah asked, gesturing to the gathering below where humans moved comfortably among beings from across the galaxy. "Never," Minji admitted. "I just wanted to help one child who needed me." In the center of the hall, the Academy's graduation ceremony began. 50 young aliens of various species, all raised partially by human families, received their completion certificates. Among them was Jira, the young Dracolisk who had once built sandcastles with Minji's daughter Sue. Each graduate wore a sash bearing the symbol of both their biological species and their human foster family, a visual representation of their dual heritage. "They are the future," said Elder Krith, who had made the journey to Earth despite his advanced age. "Neither fully of their birth world nor of Earth, but something new. Something better." As the ceremony concluded, the graduates performed a song they had composed together, their different voices creating strange but beautiful harmonies. The human audience members wiped away tears, moved by the significance of the moment. Outside the embassy, ordinary citizens of Seoul went about their daily lives, many sharing their homes with alien youngsters who needed the special gift that humans could provide. What had once seemed extraordinary had become simply part of life on Earth. A small Nalthak child, reptilian like the Dracolisks but with brilliant feathers, tugged on Minji's sleeve. "Teacher," the child asked in a musical voice, "why did humans decide to help us when so many others would not?" Minji smiled, thinking back to that first day with Tarek, when she had been frightened but determined. "Because we recognized something in you," she said simply. "Not your differences, but your needs. And meeting those needs is what makes us human." Above them, Dracolisk ships continued their protective orbit around Earth, guardians of the world that had saved their species through nothing more complex than understanding that even the fiercest predators need to be nurtured before they can become their best selves.